Earlier this week, it was requested that I went ahead and made a Week 16 defense rankings, basically for those of you who are in a bye week right now and are not playing this week or are just trying to prepare for next week and get out on your waiver wire. So that's exactly what I'm doing today, and I will say this before I get into any of the rankings. Absolutely, things are subject to change because this is being filmed before Week 15 fantasy football. But go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So getting into our first tier right here, I've got the Bills defense at number 1, and they're taking on the New England Patriots in Week 16. Now, the Bills are playing the Patriots at home, right? Obviously, the Bills' defense last week against the Los Angeles Rams was not particularly good. The Rams' offense could put up way more points than the Patriots. The Bills actually won't get a break until this Patriots game because they're taking on the Detroit Lions here this upcoming weekend. So, in my opinion, they go back home, they get a sigh of relief, and they can take on a divisional opponent that they can beat the brakes off of because the Buffalo Bills, with Von Miller back, have more of a threat of a pass rush, and they can take the ball away from an offense that is absolutely turnover prone. And as far as I know, Drake May's on a pretty nice hot streak of throwing interceptions per game. So he will absolutely turn the ball over, of course. And I do expect the Bills to be a really solid play versus the New England Patriots in Week 16. And then at number 2, I've got the Lions defense at Chicago. Again, the Lions have had, several games in a row where they're going to have really tough opponents too. They played Green Bay last week. They're obviously taking on the Bills this week. Again, they get to breathe a sigh of relief in Week 16 when they take on the Chicago Bears. Now, it's in Chicago. Who really cares? In my opinion, and if you saw Week 15's fantasy football defense rankings, what I said about the Vikings defense, who are playing the Bears this weekend, is that I still do think the Bears will have a little bit of fight in them. I think after this week, it's over. The Bears looked like they were done against the 49ers. I think they'll have a little bit more pride, and, the Vikings are beatable defensively just through the air, just so you understand. The Lions are not that forgiving through the air. So I think that, with an inadequate rushing game, which they absolutely have, and obviously when they're taking on a defense that is so brutal against the pass, which Detroit is, and you have an opportunistic defense, I don't think there's going to be many points scored for the Bears, and I do think that there's a couple turnovers on the docket. And then at number 3, I've got the Packers defense rounding this tier out. It's in Green Bay, and it's versus New Orleans, so it's going to be brutal weather in favor of the Packers because they're the ones who benefit from these weather games. And then you get New Orleans here, who is obviously horrendous. They're starting Jake Haener this weekend, and I'm not saying that they should start Spencer Rattler. All I'm saying is that Jake Haener is not the answer. It's either way going to stink. The Saints literally have no hope offensively outside of an Alvin Kamara play. That's it. And the Packers defense, I have pointed out several times this year that they've been a really good defense in fantasy football. Like over the past several weeks, they've obviously played opponents like the Detroit Lions, the Miami Dolphins, the San Francisco 49ers, the Bears. So they've had a mixed bag here. But even against the Dolphins, when I made them a number 1 defense that week, they were not bad. They had like 10 fantasy points depending on your format. So I just do think that this game here against the Saints, they're going to get turnovers from the Saints because the Packers defense is very opportunistic with turnovers, as you can see on the screen, and they also do get after your quarterback. I don't see a saving grace here for the Saints that week. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Rams defense at number 4, and they are taking on the New York Jets in New York. Now, I do think that's a problem. Typically West Coast teams or East Coast teams traveling across country, that's typically not a great recipe for success, especially this late in the year. But this is a positive thing. The Rams obviously played on Thursday night. They played against the 49ers. They were a great defensive play, by the way, and they were also inside my top 12 this week. The Rams defense, I think, is a great defense. Like, I've pointed this out for the better part of 2 months now. This is a defense that is actually legitimately good in fantasy football because they have a serious pass rush and they get turnovers as well. And I think that this is a great recipe because they're going to be coming off a really long week. The Jets, on the other hand, they're a failing team. They looked fine offensively last week, and I'm sure they'll look fine this week because they're playing the Jags. They haven't played a defense that's going to be as good as the Rams in a long time. I think the Rams are a great play in Week 16. And I think the Colts, honestly, are a really good play too. The Colts defense, I've kind of discussed them throughout the year. Last year they were one of my favorite defenses in fantasy. This year they obviously haven't been as good. They're the defense number 17 right now. But the thing about the Colts is that they've had several games where they've been viable. That's because of the fact that they actually do create the big spike plays that we need. They have 9 interceptions, 9 fumbles recovered, and 32 sacks. So they can hit those big plays. And against Tennessee, this is an offense that's failing right now, obviously. They just put up 6 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, for crying out loud. Colts defense is better. I think the Colts defense, it does have a really good matchup upcoming versus Tennessee, so I'll take them at number 5 in Indianapolis when they're still fighting for playoffs. And then the Broncos defense and the Chargers defense, I've got them back-to-back here at 6 and 7. Now they're taking on each other, and the game is in Los Angeles here. Now, here's my thing with this whole thing, right? The Broncos, my reason for having them a spot ranked higher, and honestly, you could kind of interchange these because it makes sense to do both. The Broncos, obviously, their defense has been fantastic all year. They're the number 2 defense right now, only behind the Minnesota Vikings, averaging 10.2 fantasy points per game because they have the most sacks in the NFL right now. 47 sacks heading into Week 15. Their defense has been lights out as far as getting after your quarterback. And I also think about it like this. Herbert has been banged up because of offensive line issues over the last several weeks. So I expect them to get after Herbert. I also expect them to have continued struggles scoring the ball. Like Los Angeles without J.K. Dobbins, that's a different team. I've been saying this for a while. That team is so much different without J.K. Dobbins. Honestly, he's their most valuable offensive player. It's not outside of Herbert, of course. That guy's their most valuable playmaker. It's a totally different offense. I think the Broncos hold them to little points. On the other hand, the Chargers obviously been great in fantasy too. The number 4 defense in fantasy football. And they get after your quarterback too with 39 sacks. They've also got 13 interceptions, 4 fumbles recovered. They get basically the same amount of turnovers as the Denver Broncos do. It's very, very similar. So with the Chargers defense, the reason I have them ranked a little bit lower is because Denver has more potential to score. Now, they also have more potential to turn the ball over, and it's a divisional matchup, so I like the potential that it could be low scoring. I do think both defenses are going to be good in this game. I'll tell you what I don't think, because I know that Jordan Love is going to get more than 0.5 total yards against the Seattle Seahawks in Week 15, and that is what his projection is on Underdog right now. So you hit the higher on this one, you're winning free money right now, and you got to take advantage of it before the end of the season by going down in the comments below and grabbing the link that's there and using code FFN to sign up for Underdog. And when you hit the higher on this sweat-free pick for Jordan Love this week, they'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now, dropping now to our next tier, I've got it very, very sealed off for 2 defenses that are fantastic, but I don't particularly love their matchups. The Steelers defense at number 8 at the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, in Baltimore changes a little bit. We obviously know the Ravens can put up tons of points. But the other thing that I pointed out the first matchup, the first time the Steelers played the Ravens, is that Lamar Jackson's record versus the Steelers, it's actually bad. Like, Mike Tomlin has his number. I will absolutely say that 100%. The Steelers' defense has also been fantastic because they do a combination of getting after your quarterback with 32 sacks, and they get so many turnovers. They have 28 turnovers this year. It's unbelievable. They don't make mistakes, and they get you to make mistakes. So I do see the potential that this could be another solid week from the Steelers, even though I don't particularly love the matchup because of the Lamar Jackson factor that he could go off at any moment. But the reality and the history points to is that Mike Tomlin has this guy figured out. He knows how to attack his weaknesses and really minimize and smother his strengths. So I do kind of side with the Steelers on this one again in Week 16. And the Vikings defense, they're going to Seattle to take on the Seahawks here. And listen, I don't think that this matchup should be as bad, but the way that the Seahawks are playing over the last month in particular, it's fantastic. I mean, the Seahawks, realistically, Geno is one of the most picked off quarterbacks in the entire NFL this year. So there is the potential for that. He has been playing a little cleaner lately the past 2 games or so, and the Seahawks can put up points. Like, this offense can be lethal at times. And so I just don't particularly love this one. It's in Seattle, which is one of the best home advantages of any NFL team, especially at this time of the year. The Vikings defense has been great. They're the number 1 defense, and honestly, that's the only thing that's keeping them inside the top 10, because I know they get after your quarterback, and I know they are so vicious with getting turnovers, man. They could easily do it against the Seahawks. I just don't particularly love this one because the Seahawks are hot right now. Dropping down to our last tier, we've got a collection, 2 particular defenses that I do not like, but the matchups are great. The Bengals defense at number 10 versus Cleveland. They also made the list. inside the top 15, top 12 this week in week 15. So I'll tell you this, if they're not very good this week, they're probably not going to be here next week when you see me do the real week 16 fantasy football defense rankings. I think it's very good to, it's a good rule to follow. As I've been saying, Jameis Winston, when you get the opportunity to play him as a fantasy defense, you play him. Because the guy is awesome. He's awesome. Like, he provides himself fantasy upside sometimes. He provides lots of it to the pass catchers, and he provides it to the defense. This guy will throw interceptions against the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's kind of been the Bengals' one saving grace on defense this year, is they actually are not horrific at getting turnovers. 8 interceptions this year and 6 fumbles recovered. That's not a bad number. It's not. So the Bengals defense just has a great opportunity versus the Cleveland Browns. Then we've got the Falcons defense at 11. They're taking on the Giants. I don't feel like I really need to discuss much of this. The matchup is obviously fantastic. But I'll tell you this, you may be shocked if you knew how far behind the Giants defense was. It's really not that far. I think the Falcons are easily not, I think the Giants is just not that bad of a play because of the way the Falcons are playing. The Falcons are here because I think the Giants are the most dysfunctional franchise right now in football. But the Falcons defense is 30th right now in fantasy football. They have 19 sacks. They have 7 interceptions and 4 fumbles recovered. Their defense just has not done very well. They're so streaky, and even when they're on, it's not a particularly strong game. But again, this matchup is so strong that it makes me feel kind of obligated to put them inside the top 12, because I just don't think that the Giants will be able to put up more than 17 points against the Falcons. And then at number 12 to round us all out, a defense I feel way better ranking, the Texans defense, and they're going to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Listen, the Texans defense has obviously been awesome in fantasy football. This defense is so aggressive. 42 sacks, 16 interceptions, 7 fumbles recovered. As the defense number 6 this year, they've been pretty sweet. And the one good thing about Kansas City this year is that they do turn the ball over offensively. Mahomes has not played the cleanest, and they've been they've been just turning the ball over and been a little sloppy offensively as a whole. So I just think that with this combination here, the Texans are very tenacious, and the Chiefs do turn the ball over. I just think that the Texans defense ultimately pulls one out as a good game, because I don't know if they're going to win this game. I don't know if the Chiefs put up 30 points. I do believe that they will come away with some turnovers in this game, though, and that's why they're inside the top 12. Again, stay tuned for next week. I will re-release the Week 16 fantasy defense rankings just to give you the updates after this particular weekend in Week 15. And if you want to see this week's top 12 defense rankings in Week 15 fantasy football, click on this video right here.